Hello everyone, this is Casing in Pajamas. Today we're bringing you a very exciting and also up-to-date case for you to solve. So let's get started. This is brought to you by Casing in Pajamas. We apply casing in real-life situations. We show you how consulting and banking do not need to always happen in boardrooms and can be done even wearing pajamas. For Epic Games lovers, it's probably a bad time for you to delete the games on your iPhones, as Apple has just terminated Epic's accounts after its battle with Fortnite. So for those who are not familiar with the story, the dispute began when Fortnite developed its own in-app payment system to circumvent the 30% transaction fees that Apple requires. So today, our case prompt would be, should Apple's App Store consider changing its 30% transaction fees model? Okay, background first. Fortnite, one of the most popular video games, is a free-to-play, cross-platform battle royale game under Epic Games. As of May 2020, there were 350 million registered players on Fortnite, of which a third of those are on mobile. In 2019, Fortnite posted $1.8 billion in revenue, where the bulk of the revenue comes from in-app purchases through selling V-Bucks, the in-game currency the players use to purchase items such as cosmetic skins, dances, and pre-release game modes. And this leads them to a direct conflict with Apple. Now, the problem with Apple is that Apple's App Store charges 30% standard fees for any transactions that is going through the Apple's payment system, which is mandatory for most of the Apple's App Store apps. So effectively, every $10 spent on Fortnite virtual items, $3 would go to Apple, which Epic Games obviously find it too excessive. And Epic Games is not the only company facing such an issue. Since 2018, Spotify only allows registration and payment on its website to bypass Apple's 30% cut. But Fortnite took one step further. It implemented an in-app payment system of its own with a 20% discount, which is effectively declaring a war on Apple. Within hours, Apple removed Fortnite from the App Store. Fortnite immediately followed up with a lawsuit and a video called Eighty-Fortnite, portraying Apple as the anti-competitive monopoly.
Today, we celebrate the anniversary of the platform unification directives. For years, they have given us their songs, their labor.
So this series of responses from Epic Games all happened at a juncture when Apple is already facing monthly antitrust pressure from the regulator, seemingly setting up a trap for Apple. Okay, so now let's go back to our consulting framework. Now the question is whether Apple should change the fees model for the App Store. How would a consultant approach this question and set up a framework? We need to look at all the stakeholders, so how we're going to structure it is that we can look at the company itself, which is Apple in this case, the App Store competitors, the users, and finally the regulators, which can be quite important in our case. We came up with these boxes kind of spontaneously, but we get a similar result if we apply the basic 3C framework, the company, customer, and competitors. First of all, for the company, we have to understand the basis Apple uses to price the App Store and how the potential changes affect its profitability. So historically, Apple has been charging a 30% cut in the offering of the platform, which Apple claims that, to quote, Epic has benefited from the Apple Store ecosystem, including its tools, testing, and distribution. Annually, Apple derives an estimated amount of $50 billion of revenue from App Store, including in-app purchases in games, app sales, and subscriptions. This is about 1/5 of Apple's total revenue base in 2019. In this case, we can see that any reduction in the transaction fees or allowing third-party payment system would have a significant impact on the Apple's profitability overall. As for the competitors, we should look into App Store competitors and substitutes, as well as the pricing behaviors of those. As you can probably guess, the main competitor is the Google Play Store, which is not available on iOS. Similarly, Play Store charges 30% fees and faces lots of antitrust issues. But the duopoly dynamics adds to the argument that Apple should not change the pricing if Google maintains the same prices. However, one thing that we might consider is that a potential point could be the challenge from Huawei as it makes significant investments into App Gallery and its independent Harmony OS, though it is a minor point as for now due to low market share for the moment. And for the consumers, this is where the technique of segmentation comes in. We could focus on app developers rather than the users themselves and try to segment different groups. And this is where it gets interesting because some app developers do have strong bargaining power. For example, Apple gave Amazon an exemption to the 30% fee when selling TV shows and movie rentals through its Prime Video app, likely due to the strong user base on Amazon. But this has led to numerous critiques to its unfair practices. A possible recommendation can be that whether Apple should take a differentiated pricing approach to app developers. In the case of Fortnite, the game commands a loyal fan base, and Epic Games also owns Unreal Engine, which is an important developer tool to create games, making the case to offer a different fee structure. And not to forget a last point, which is the larger antitrust context in the US right now. The big tech companies, as we all know, have been under heavy fire under the Trump administration, and Apple is under scrutiny over the App Store monopoly. At the same time, Spotify has filed a formal antitrust complaint in the EU, and likely it will play a role in pressuring Apple's decision-making. So here's where we end our framework for this case. In an actual case interview, the interviewer might follow up with a market sizing question about App Store revenue or calculate the different profit scenarios of fees reduction. Perhaps a full segmentation of the App Store revenue by the apps, depending on the size of user base, recurring versus one-off payment, ease of redirecting users to other platforms, basically to examine the feasibility of a differentiated pricing approach. So personally, we believe that Apple is unlikely to change the pricing model given the importance of App Store and the stable competitive dynamics with Android Play Store. Instead, Apple could further look into its differentiated pricing treatment while continuing to defend its value proposition. Ultimately, we need to think about what exactly is Apple offering in return for this transaction fees. So here comes the end of our first episode. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. Once again, this is Casing in Pajamas. We are students who are really passionate about casing as a systematic way of thinking and want to apply it into everyday business contexts. Whether it be consulting or investment banking, analyzing business cases can be a challenging but also super fun process. Having gone through extensive interviews prep and browsing through all possible materials out there, we realize how the conventional prepping process can be so disconnected to everyday lives. In this channel, we will explore businesses around us by actively framing them into potential case interviews and attempting to solve them. This is a little bit more about our channel, and if you find it relevant to you, please subscribe and show support. We would really appreciate it. And we will see you really soon.